They threw me a retirement party to celebrate my legacy. Someone there came to erase it. The room glowed with laughter and toasts. But when she handed me that drink, something in her eyes turned it into a threat. Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. I'm Eleanor Grant, former VP, mother, widow. And until recently, the only one who didn't see the threat sleeping under my roof. The lights were low, but golden. The kind of soft haze that flatters faces and softens memories. The banquet hall buzzed with old friends, colleagues, and family, people who had watched me build 40 years of a career, now gathered to say goodbye. Or at least, cheers. I was supposed to feel proud. But all I felt was watched. My son, Michael, beamed at me from across the room, holding his daughter, my granddaughter, Ella, who kept tugging at the string of her balloon, giggling. The image should have comforted me. But I was distracted. My eyes kept going back to Amber. Amber, my daughter-in-law. Always perfectly composed. The kind of woman who made people say things like she's a catch or Michael's lucky. I had said those things too, once. She moved through the crowd with ease, a glass of champagne in each hand, her smile fixed. But when her eyes landed on me, it changed. Just a flicker. Something tight and almost anticipatory. There you are, she said, voice warm, handing me one of the flutes. To the woman of the hour. I took the glass, but my stomach curled. There was something off, maybe the scent? Champagne always had that sharp sweetness, but this one smelled herbaceous. Faintly floral, but not pleasant. Like crushed leaves that had sat too long in water. Still, I smiled. Thank you, Amber. You've been amazing today. She tilted her glass in response but didn't drink. Just watched me. I brought mine halfway to my lips. People around us began cheering. Speech. Speech. Someone turned the music down. All eyes on me now. My throat was dry. I cleared it, stepped up to the small platform, and looked out at the sea of faces, some dear, some distant. I gave the speech I'd written in my head a dozen times but never committed to paper. Thanked my colleagues, my late husband, my son, and finally, my family. But as I raised my glass for the final toast, I hesitated. Amber was still watching. Unblinking. Her glass, still untouched. My heart tapped a slow warning in my chest. And then I did something I can't quite explain, a small, almost clumsy shuffle. I stepped off the platform and bumped lightly into the young caterer holding a tray of fresh champagne. Sorry, I said, and reached out, swapping mine for a new one. It took less than a second. Amber blinked, just once, and that smile slipped. She quickly raised her glass and drank. I did too. The crowd erupted in cheers. Glasses clinked. Music swelled again. But inside me, a different noise took root, the rustle of suspicion. The clink of danger. I switched glasses. Simple move. But that action felt like crossing an invisible line. The taste was crisp, familiar, without the sharp bite of whatever had tainted the first glass. But even as bubbles danced on my tongue, I couldn't ignore the weight of Amber's gaze. She drank too. Or at least, she appeared to. She smiled like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just handed me a drink with a scent that didn't belong. People laughed around us. A few old colleagues came up to shake my hand, hug me, recount war stories from the office. I nodded along, smiled politely. But my eyes kept flicking to Amber across the room, where she was talking to Michael now, laughing too loudly. Then something strange happened. Jameson, a former colleague, now mostly a drinking buddy, walked up to me, rubbing his stomach. "That new caterer stuff is heavy," he muttered. "Champagne was weird, wasn't it?" I froze. "Weird how?" He shrugged. "Taste it off. A little bitter, maybe. But I drank it anyway." He gave a half laugh, then winced. "Shouldn't have." I blinked. Jameson was the one whose glass I'd originally taken. That was his drink. The one Amber had handed me. My heart dropped. He looked pale. Not enough to raise alarms, yet, but I knew Jameson. He could down whiskey like water, and he never complained about champagne. I turned sharply to Amber. She wasn't laughing anymore. She was looking directly at me. Her expression was blank. Not angry. Not confused. Just still. Then, as if catching herself, she smiled again and turned back to Michael, brushing something off his jacket. It was like watching a snake slide back into the grass. I moved through the crowd, the room suddenly too hot, the air buzzing with a frequency only I seemed to hear. People clinked glasses, but the sound was distant. Dull. I reached the bar. "Did you bring your own bottles?" I asked the bartender. He gave me a look. "No ma'am, everything's from our stock." I glanced back at Amber. Still smiling. Still sipping. But something about her posture felt like control. Like she was orchestrating the entire evening from behind a mask. Did anyone else notice? I wasn't sure anymore. I went to the restroom just to breathe. My hand trembled as I locked the stall door and sat down fully clothed on the lid. I pulled out my phone and texted Michael. "Is Amber okay?" She seemed a bit off. No reply. I heard the door open. High heels. 2 steps. Pause. Then another 2 steps. I held my breath. A soft voice floated in. "You know," Amber said, not realizing I was in the stall, "it's funny how people think retirement means rest. For some, it means decline." She wasn't on the phone. She was speaking softly, to herself. Or maybe, to me. Then the heels clicked back out. My hands were shaking when I came out. I splashed cold water on my face. Checked my reflection. I looked like I'd aged 5 years in one evening. As I exited the restroom, someone bumped into me, a waitress clearing glasses. "I'm so sorry," she said. I nodded automatically, then glanced at her tray. There were 2 flutes, one with lipstick smudges, one empty, but both familiar. The empty one was mine. The second, untouched. The one Amber had originally handed me. But it wasn't untouched anymore. It was gone. Everyone cheered, but the moment froze in my mind. What had I just avoided? Back in the hall, the party had taken on a new rhythm. The band played soft jazz, the food trays were half empty, and the champagne glasses continued to flow. I drifted through it all, a ghost in my own celebration. Jameson was now sitting on a chair near the back, one hand rubbing his temple. "It's just indigestion," he insisted to someone who offered to call a nurse. "I'll be fine." But his skin looked clammy. His eyes were glassy. And I couldn't stop watching him. Was I overreacting? I had built a career on instincts, reading the room, knowing when numbers didn't align, when someone was bluffing. But now, standing here, surrounded by laughter, I felt insane. Suspicious of my own family. My own daughter-in-law. I spotted Amber across the room. She held a plate in her hand, but she wasn't eating. She was talking to my sister-in-law, Julia, laughing at some story. But her eyes kept darting back to me, like she was checking to see if I was still functional. Still breathing. I walked over to the caterers and pointed toward the bus tray with the missing flute. "Excuse me, did someone take a glass from this tray?" The server looked confused. "I just cleared it a few minutes ago." "Who took the glasses?" "Bar back, I think." "Want me to check?" I shook my head. "Never mind." The evidence was gone. The original glass, the one Amber had pressed into my hand, vanished. I moved back toward Jameson, sat beside him. "How do you feel?" He winced. "Weird. Not drunk. Just foggy. Like I could fall asleep standing up." He paused. "Why?" I swallowed. "Just checking. I think you might have gotten a bad pour." He looked at me sharply. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, then lied. "I thought mine smelled strange too. I switched it out with a fresh one." He nodded, then grimaced. "Wish I had." I helped him to the water station. People noticed us, a few asked if he was okay. I kept my responses vague. Amber didn't approach. Not once. Later, as I tried to enjoy a slice of cake that tasted like cardboard, Michael came to sit beside me. "You okay, Mom?" I looked at him. My boy. 33, strong, smart, and utterly blind to the danger sitting across the table. "I'm fine," I lied. He smiled. "Amber's been amazing tonight. You know she planned this whole thing herself?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. She's full of surprises." He looked confused for a second. "What's that mean?" "Nothing," I said. "Forget it." He leaned in, grinning. "Hey, don't go paranoid on me now. You're retired. You're supposed to relax." I managed a laugh, but inside, something was unraveling. Michael kissed my cheek and stood to help Ella reach the chocolate fountain. Amber passed behind me, and leaned in, her breath cool against my ear. "Everything okay?" she asked sweetly. My hands tensed around my fork. I didn't turn. Just nodded. "Good," she whispered. "You looked a little flushed earlier." And then she was gone again. It wasn't the words. It was the tone, the perfect mix of concern and threat. The control. And the way she didn't sit to eat or drink the rest of the night. She was watching. Waiting. For what? My vision blurred for a moment. Had I even seen the swirl in that first glass? The party noise was starting to suffocate me. The music. The clinks. The forced cheerfulness. I faked a phone call. Pressed my mobile to my ear and mouthed, "Just a minute," to a curious Julia. Then I slipped through the side hallway, past the kitchen and staff corridor, toward the rear exit where the noise faded into muffled echoes. The hallway was narrow, dimly lit. I leaned against the cool wall and closed my eyes. My body buzzed, but not from champagne. From adrenaline. From dread. Was I making this up? Was I overreacting to nothing? No. Jameson's reaction wasn't imagined. The smell in that glass. Amber's too perfect smile. Her whispered words. The missing flute. I needed proof. But more than that, I needed to know why. Then I heard it, voices. Low. Coming from around the corner, near the service elevator. I held my breath and stepped carefully, pressing against the wall as I approached the bend. Amber's voice. I told you it would be fine. She didn't drink it. A pause. A man's voice, hushed, urgent. You're sure? Positive, Amber replied. She swapped glasses. I don't know how she knew, but she did. Silence. Then Amber again, it doesn't change anything. She'll slip eventually. My heart stopped. Another pause. The man again, softer, slower, you shouldn't have tried anything tonight. I wasn't going to hurt her, she snapped. It was just a light dose. To slow her down. To start the pattern. That's all. Start the pattern? My hands went cold. Amber's voice softened, almost childlike. She's in the way. You know that. She'll never give Michael the trust, the control, the house. She still sees him as a boy. A pause. And she still sees me as a guest. The silence that followed was louder than the words. I stepped back carefully, heart hammering. Then, I knocked over something. A broom, leaning against the wall. It fell with a loud clang. Shit, I whispered, and turned, rushing down the hall, back toward the party. Behind me, hurried footsteps. But they didn't follow. When I reached the main hall, I tried to look normal. Smiling, laughing at someone's joke about retirement cruise brochures. But inside me, something broke. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. Amber had planned something. With someone else. And she knew I was on to her. I scanned the room. Amber was there, calm, drink in hand, talking to Michael again. The man she'd spoken to in the hallway wasn't anyone I recognized. Not from this party. Was he staff? A friend? A handler? Was Michael part of this? I didn't know. And that's what scared me most. At home, I pulled out an old photo of me and Amber. Something in her eyes in that picture now terrified me. The night ended quietly, too quietly. No dramatic speeches, no second toasts. Just polite goodbyes, a few hugs, and a hollow smile from Amber as she kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Sleep well." I barely responded. Back home, the silence was heavier than the celebration had ever been. I kicked off my shoes, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall. There was something about being home alone that let the mask fall. All the forced smiles, the polite laughter, gone now. In their place, just one overwhelming question. What had Amber meant by starting the pattern? The words replayed, like a scratched record. She'll slip eventually. She's in the way. I stood up, walked to the closet, and opened an old wooden box on the top shelf. A box filled with family photos, holiday cards, handwritten notes from Michael when he was a boy. One photo in particular stopped me cold. Amber and I, Thanksgiving, 7 years ago, shortly after they got married. We were in the kitchen, both wearing aprons, flour on our hands. She was holding a pie dish. I was laughing. She wasn't. In the photo, her smile was perfect. But her eyes, now, in this moment, years later, I saw what I hadn't seen before. Control. Or was it calculation? It's easy to rewrite the past when fear sharpens your gaze. Still, I couldn't deny the chill that moved through me. Had there always been something off? I remembered the first time I met her, how she always mirrored me. Same wine preference, same books, same hobbies. It had seemed sweet. A desire to connect. But now it felt rehearsed. Like she had studied me. Suddenly, I remembered something else. A day years ago, after Michael and Amber had returned from their honeymoon. I had offered Amber some chamomile tea. She politely declined but asked which brand I used. Said it smelled different. A few weeks later, I'd found that same tea in their home. Except, it wasn't for drinking. It had been poured into a bath. When I asked, she laughed and said, "I heard it relaxes the skin." I hadn't thought twice about it then. But now, those herbs, that floral, earthy scent from the champagne, came rushing back. Chamomile. Lavender. Maybe something else. My throat tightened. I opened my medicine cabinet and began checking the bottles. Nothing missing. Nothing moved. But then I noticed something strange, a bottle of valerian root capsules, expired, dusty, but now only half full. I hadn't touched them in over a year. I hadn't needed sleep aids since spring. And yet, someone had. Or still was. I grabbed the bottle and stared at it like it could speak. Downstairs, a car passed, its headlights briefly flashing across my window. For a second, I thought it would stop in front of the house. But it didn't. Still, I closed the curtains, double-locked the back door, and slid the valerian bottle into my nightstand drawer. Then I pulled out my phone. Michael still hadn't replied to my earlier message. I hesitated, fingers hovering over his name. And then? I didn't call him. Because I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. Then I checked my watch, still wet with condensation. But I hadn't drunk anything since I switched glasses. They said nothing toxic, but their calm tone said everything. I woke with a headache, not sharp, just wrong. Like I hadn't slept at all, even though I'd gone to bed before midnight. The valerian bottle in the drawer still haunted me. I hadn't touched the capsules. But what if I had, and just didn't remember? That's what Amber wanted, wasn't it? To make me doubt myself. To make everyone else think I was slipping. Fading. Just another old woman past her usefulness. I booked a doctor's appointment first thing that morning. Told them I was feeling lightheaded, that something had been off since the party. They squeezed me in. I didn't tell them everything. Not yet. Didn't mention the drink, the swap, the overheard conversation in the hallway. Just said I'd had some champagne and felt foggy. Out of balance. Not myself. The nurse asked if I could be dehydrated. If I'd eaten enough. I answered politely, but I wasn't really listening. Because I knew my body. I knew when something wasn't right. Blood work was ordered. Standard panels. Toxicology, at my request. The doctor, a man half my age, smiled too much. Tried to reassure me like I was a child, not a woman who had run multimillion-dollar departments and negotiated contracts longer than he'd been alive. Could be early onset anxiety, he offered. Retirement brings big shifts. I smiled, nodded, thanked him. And made a note in my phone, "Don't come back here." Back at home, I stared at the blood test receipt. Results in 48 hours, they said. I wasn't going to wait. I pulled out the notepad from my desk drawer. The one I hadn't used in years. Flipped it to a clean page and wrote at the top. If something happens to me. Then I began listing everything. The swapped drink. Jameson's reaction. Amber's whispered comment in the restroom. The overheard conversation in the hall. The missing champagne flute. The valerian bottle. The expired tea she once asked about. It read like a paranoid list. But it felt like truth. I made 3 copies and hid them, one in my safe, one under the seat of my car, and one, tucked in the attic, inside an old suitcase I knew Amber would never touch. At dinner that night, Michael finally called. "Hey, Mom. Sorry I didn't get back to you." Crazy day. You okay? His voice was warm. Familiar. Comforting. But also, practiced. I'm fine, I said. Just a little off. Probably too much champagne. You sure? Amber said you looked tired. She was worried. Of course she was. Tell her I appreciate that. Okay. A pause. She's thinking of staying with you a few days. Said she could help you settle into retirement, ease the transition. I froze. She doesn't need to do that, I said carefully. She wants to. Said you looked overwhelmed. I almost laughed. I almost screamed. Instead, I said, tell her I'm fine. But she's welcome to stop by. Because if she was coming into my house, I needed to be ready. And I needed the results from the test. The call ended with a love you, Mom, and I said it back. But my hand was shaking when I put the phone down. I stood, went to the kitchen, and poured every open bottle of anything, wine, tea, herbal tinctures, down the sink. Then I washed the drain twice. As I left the clinic, I realized my glass, the one I'd switched into, was still on the counter, empty. The phone rang just past 8 p.m. Amber's name lit up the screen. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part, the sharper, colder part, wanted to know what mask she'd wear next. I answered. Hi, Amber. Silence for half a second. Then, you've been acting strange. No greeting. No small talk. I let the words hang in the air. Excuse me? At the party. And after. You're not yourself. Michael's worried. A beat. I could hear her breathing. Steady. Measured. You swapped the drink, didn't you? I sat down slowly. What are you talking about? I handed you the glass myself. You smelled it. You hesitated. Then you handed it off to Jameson. My stomach turned. She saw. She'd watched every move. Jameson didn't feel well that night, I said coolly. Amber laughed softly. Funny how that worked out. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed quiet. Listen, she said, her voice shifting into something softer. I know things have been tense between us. You've never really warmed to me. That's okay. But if you're starting to question your own memory, if things are slipping, I want to help. You mean like slipping something into my glass? A pause. Just long enough to confirm the truth. I think, she said, ice in her tone now, that you should rest. A few days off your feet. Stop worrying so much. You don't get to decide when I rest. No, she said. But Michael does. He's worried. He thinks maybe you've been overwhelmed. The word again. The narrative she was building. You talked to him? I asked, already knowing the answer. He called me, she said. After your last conversation. He said you sounded paranoid. My throat tightened. Amber's voice softened again. You're not in trouble. But if you keep acting erratic, he's going to make decisions you won't like. And there it was. The real threat. Not a poison drink, not a missing flute. Control. She was building a narrative where I was the unstable one. And Michael, my son, my blood, was starting to believe it. Because it was easier to believe his wife than to accept that she might be quietly dismantling his family from the inside out. I hung up. I stared at the dark screen. And then I cried. Not a dramatic sob. Just quiet, steady tears. Because the first layer of armor had cracked. And now I was alone. I called Michael. He answered on the third ring. "Hey," he said, cheerful. "Amber just told me you talked. Everything okay now?" "No," I said. Silence. "I need you to listen to me, Michael. Just listen. Please." He exhaled, the kind of sigh you give your mother when you think she's overreacting. "Amber is not who you think she is." "There," said Mom. "No. Just listen. Something happened at the party. She handed me a drink I didn't trust. I swapped it. Jameson drank it. He got sick." Another silence. "You're saying Amber poisoned someone?" "I'm saying she tried to drug me. I overheard her talking to someone backstage. She said I was in the way. That she was starting the pattern." "The pattern?" I nodded. "Of making me look unstable. So when I start forgetting things, or doubting myself, you'll think I need help. And then she'll offer." "Mom, this is insane. You sound exactly how she wants me to sound." He didn't answer. I pressed on. "I had my blood tested. I'll show you the results. You don't have to believe me. Just, don't believe her blindly." After a pause, he said quietly, "She said you accused her before. Years ago. About the tea." I closed my eyes. "She said you were always suspicious of her. That you resented how close we were. That you think she replaced you. So that's the story she'd fed him. A mother scorned. A jealous woman losing her grip." "She's moving in tomorrow," Michael said finally. "Just for a few days. To help." "I don't need help," I said sharply. "I need my son to wake up. I'll call you tomorrow." He hung up. "He told me she's going to stay until I'm better. And now she's moving in." Amber's presence felt like a weight in every room. Every breath I took was louder than hers. She arrived before noon. Not with bags, but with purpose. Amber walked in like she'd lived here her whole life. She complimented the flowers on the dining table, the ones she'd sent 2 days ago. Then she offered to make tea. I declined. She made it anyway. "I brought some of that calming blend you like," she said cheerfully. I smiled politely and didn't touch it. By evening, her things were neatly placed in the guest room. She had reorganized the refrigerator shelves. She'd vacuumed the rug because it looked a little dusty. She insisted on setting the table for dinner, plating everything like we were on a cooking show. Michael came over for dinner. He noticed nothing. Or pretended not to. Amber was gracious, attentive, full of sweet comments like, "Your mother's always been so independent, it's hard to know when she needs support." Support. That word again. Like I was some aging building she planned to gut. After he left, I sat alone in the living room while she prepared herself for bed. I heard drawers opening upstairs. Heard her moving through the bathroom. Heard her drop something on the tile and whisper a soft, angry curse. Then, silence. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and found her tea mug still warm on the counter. Mine was untouched. I sniffed hers. Faint. Earthy. But too familiar. Same scent as the champagne. Lavender. Chamomile. Something bitter underneath. I took a spoon and carefully dipped it in, swirled. Then I poured a small sample into a Ziploc bag, labeled it with the date, and placed it in the back of the freezer. Just in case. The next morning, she was up before me. Cooking. Smiling. Eggs? Toast? You love soft-boiled, right? I didn't answer. I read in a study once, she said casually, that the first signs of mental decline show up in changes to taste. Isn't that interesting? I stared at her. She tilted her head. Just something I thought about when you said the champagne tasted strange. Maybe your palate's shifting. There was no malice in her tone. Just observation. And yet I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat at the table and watched her butter toast. She didn't eat hers. That afternoon, I checked the medicine cabinet. Everything was rearranged. Not missing. Just reordered. Herbal supplements placed in front. My daily prescriptions moved to the back. A tiny, deliberate message, these are better for you now. That night, she brought me a glass of warm milk before bed. For sleep, she said sweetly. I took it. Set it on my nightstand. After she left, I poured it down the bathroom sink. The next morning, the glass was cleaned and put back on the shelf, before I woke up. She was testing me. Seeing if I'd drink it. If I'd question her. If I'd remember. I started locking my bedroom door. She didn't mention it. But I could feel her disapproval in every forced smile. I stopped eating anything she prepared. Started cooking my own meals, claiming I had dietary adjustments. She offered to help me organize my pills. I laughed in her face. That night, she stood in the hallway just outside my door, not knocking, just standing. Breathing. I knew because I sat behind the door, holding my phone, recording everything. 5 minutes passed. Then she walked away. I noticed the bottle she used to help me relax. The label was older than her and the brand new. By the third day, I stopped pretending we were just sharing space. Amber had turned my home into a controlled environment, soft music in the mornings, herbal teas in the afternoon, her voice gentle but always managing to remind me of what I couldn't do. You left the kettle on again. You forgot to sign the check for the gardener. You repeated that story yesterday. Each one small. Meaningless on its own. But together, a pattern. The pattern she said she'd start. So I started my own. I followed her routines. Listened from behind doors. Watched what she touched, what she didn't. Took photos of things before she organized them. I became a ghost in my own home, but a very alert one. That afternoon, I caught a break. She was out on a walk. I checked the time. She always left her purse in the mudroom, one of those expensive designer bags with an obnoxious lock. She never locked it. Inside, I found a travel-sized glass vial wrapped in a silk handkerchief. Dark amber liquid. No label. Just the scent, bitter, sharp, herbal. Not perfume. Not oil. Tincture. My heart pounded. I photographed the vial, rewrapped it, and put everything back exactly as I found it. Then I went to the bathroom. Under the sink was a bottle of herbal sleep drops. Supposedly store-bought. Supposedly safe. But the label was off-center. Peeling slightly. I checked the expiration date. 2017. Amber wasn't even in our lives then. Still, the bottle was nearly full, but clearly used. And refilled. I opened it, took a cautious sniff. Same scent. Same mix. I bagged a sample, hid it in the freezer with the rest. I wasn't just keeping records for myself anymore. I was building a file. For Michael. For a lawyer. For the police if I had to. My next stop was the pantry. I remembered Amber saying she was reorganizing everything for easier access. I found several jars I'd never bought, with vintage-looking labels, brands I'd never heard of. One, a glass jar labeled Soothing Nerve Tonic, had the exact same smell. Amber was leaving breadcrumbs. But only because she thought I was too blind to see them. I heard the door open. She was back. I quickly stepped out of the pantry, wiping my hands on a dish towel like I'd just finished cleaning. "Oh," she said. "Organizing again?" "Can't help myself," I replied. "Muscle memory." She smiled, but her eyes scanned the kitchen like she was checking what I'd touched. "Want tea?" "No, thank you." "Milk?" "No." "Water?" "I'm fine." That night, I waited until she was asleep and opened her laptop. It was password protected, but she wasn't as clever as she thought. She used Michael's birthday. Inside were open tabs on herbal remedies, sedatives, even articles on early-stage memory decline. One article was titled, "Signs Your Parent May Need Cognitive Support." It had notes in the margins. She was building a case file against me. I took screenshots of everything. Copied her bookmarks. Downloaded her private notes. And then I shut it down and slipped it back under her bed. The next morning, she made me a smoothie. "New recipe," she said. "Blueberry, banana, maca root. For energy." I took it, smiled. Waited until she went upstairs. And poured it down the drain. Then I turned the blender inside out, and found trace residue of the same bitter scent I'd memorized by now. Then I found a vial hidden in her purse, no label, amber-colored liquid. Sunday morning was quiet. Too quiet. Amber was humming again, that same off-key tune she always used when she wanted to fill silence with control. She made pancakes I didn't ask for. Added berries in a shape that looked too intentional. A smiley face. "Eat," she said. "You'll feel better." "I'm not hungry," I replied. "You haven't eaten much lately," she said, voice lilting, just loud enough to register. "Michael's worried." There it was again. Michael. Always watching, never asking me directly. I stood, grabbed my coat, and said I needed air. Amber followed. "You shouldn't be alone," she said. "You've been forgetting things." She had her phone out. "Recording? Taking notes?" "I need space," I said, sharper now. "Please." She blinked, the mask faltering just a little. "Okay," she said. "I'll go with you." I drove. She came along. Quiet. Tense. Watching. We ended up at the local market, a quiet co-op with open aisles and earthy smells. Familiar faces. A place where I could breathe. We walked in near the produce section. That's when she stumbled. Hard. Groceries flew from her hands. She fell backward, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Her eyes fluttered shut. A woman nearby gasped. "Are you okay?" "Someone call 911. Amber moaned, barely. I knelt beside her. Checked her pulse. Steady. Too steady. "Amber," I whispered. Her eyes opened, just a sliver. And in that moment, just for a breath, she smiled. Then she shut them again and began trembling slightly. The ambulance arrived in under 10 minutes. They took her vitals. Checked her breath. Asked what she'd eaten. What medication she was on. She listed a few natural supplements. I asked the EMT if her symptoms matched anything serious. The woman looked at me closely and said, "We see this sometimes. Light sedatives, maybe herbal. Could be stress." But she fainted. The woman's eyes didn't move from mine. Or pretended to. It's hard to tell. I looked down at Amber, sitting up now, pale but coherent, holding a water bottle someone gave her. Her hands didn't shake. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded weakly. "Just overwhelmed. I thought I smelled something strange in the fruit section. Like chemicals." I almost laughed. I almost lost it right there. They released her without taking her in. "No cause found. Maybe heat," they said. "Maybe nerves." The ride home was silent. But something had shifted. She knew I saw through her. And she no longer cared. Back at the house, I found her purse wide open on the entryway bench. Inside, nothing. The vial was gone. She had cleaned it all out. I checked her laptop that night. Wiped. Factory reset. She was scrubbing everything. I went into my room, locked the door, and opened my hidden file, notes, photos, screenshots, timestamps. But I needed something undeniable. So I called someone. Dr. Vanessa Lang, the toxicologist I'd met during a board meeting years ago. Someone who owed me a favor. "Can you analyze something?" I asked. "Privately?" "I can try," she said. "What is it?" I told her. "Not everything, just enough. I need to know what's in it." She agreed. I packed the herbal samples, the drops from the milk, and the smoothie residue. Drove them across town. Gave no explanation. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I found Amber in the sunroom, scrolling through her phone, sipping tea. "You okay?" she asked, her tone light, innocent. "You scared me," I said. She smiled. "That wasn't my intention." "No?" She met my eyes. "It'll be easier if you stop resisting." While Amber was carted in, she mouthed at me, "Good luck telling them." In the hospital, I looked around and realized everyone was on her side. 2 days passed without a word from Dr. Lang. 2 days of pretending everything was fine while Amber roamed my house like a caretaker, a wife, a shadow. On the 3rd day, Michael came over. He brought flowers. "Amber told me about the episode," he said gently, eyes soft with concern. "I'm fine," I said. "I meant her episode." I stared at him. He looked tired. Conflicted. Like someone trying to make 2 jigsaw puzzles fit together. "She said you accused her in public," he added. "That you embarrassed her. That she fainted because she was overwhelmed by how tense things have gotten." He paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. "She said you've been unstable lately." There it was. The word she'd planted weeks ago was finally blooming in his mouth. Unstable. "I'm not unstable," I said quietly. "I'm being hunted." Michael frowned. "Mom." "I've recorded her," I snapped. "I have photos, samples, timestamps. I overheard her planning it. She said she was starting the pattern." Michael's face stiffened. "That's not what she said." I blinked. "You heard the recording?" "She told me what you think you heard." "Think?" "Mom, please. I love you. But this is how it starts." The pity in his eyes shattered me. Not anger. Not worry. Just gentle pity. Like I was already gone. I sat down. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. "She's going to take everything," I whispered. "You'll see." Michael stood there for a moment. Then he put a hand on my shoulder. "We're just trying to help." That night, Amber made stew. She didn't bring it to me directly. Left it outside my room on a tray like I was a patient. With a note, "Eat when you're ready." I poured it down the toilet. Then I searched the house again. This time, I looked in places I hadn't before: Michael's old room, the attic, the garage. Nothing. No more vials. No more tinctures. Amber was careful now. She didn't need evidence. She had perception on her side. But perception can be manipulated. The next morning, I went to the clinic again. Said I wanted my own copy of all blood work and incident reports. The nurse smiled, too bright. "Oh, didn't Dr. Mayer mention? Your files were merged into the family access folder." "What?" "Amber has caregiver access. She requested it last week." Caregiver. The word made me dizzy. I left without taking the papers. As I walked to my car, I passed a couple from the co-op. They looked at me differently now, hesitantly. Like someone who's heard a rumor but hasn't confirmed it yet. Amber's narrative was spreading. At home, I checked the locks on every door and window. Then I sat on the floor of my bedroom, all lights off, and waited. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from Dr. Lang. Her voice was rushed. Quiet. Urgent. "Hi. I tested the samples. There's definitely something there: low-dose sedatives, herbal extracts not sold commercially. I'll send you a breakdown. Don't confront her until you have backup. Call me as soon as you can." I replayed the message 3 times. Relief. Proof. But also, terror. Amber would know I was close. I held my husband's hand. He squeezed back with pity, not belief. I saw the vial again, in the glove compartment of my car. I'd taken it myself, or so it seemed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the message from Dr. Lang playing in my head over and over. Proof. Confirmation. But still no power. Not without someone willing to believe me. Amber was quiet the next morning. Too quiet. She stayed in her room longer than usual. I could hear drawers opening, soft footsteps, the click of a zipper. Packing? Planning? By noon, she came downstairs and announced she was running errands. She didn't say when she'd be back. I watched her drive off, waited exactly 7 minutes, then grabbed the spare key and went to her car. It was unlocked. I opened the glove compartment. And there it was. The vial. The same one I had seen before, amber-colored, half full. No label. But this time, it wasn't hidden. It was just there, placed like bait. I froze. Why would she leave it out? Unless she wanted me to find it. To take it. To touch it. I grabbed a plastic sandwich bag from my kitchen drawer and sealed the vial inside, careful not to smudge it with fingerprints. Back in the house, I double-checked my collection of samples: the tea, the smoothie residue, the milk. I added the vial to the box, taped everything up, and drove it straight to a private P.O. box I'd rented the day before. I mailed the package to Dr. Lang's home address. No return label. No name. Just a note inside that read: "If anything happens to me, this is why." Back home, I noticed something else. My planner, the one I kept tucked in the back of my kitchen drawer, was gone. The drawer was still perfectly arranged. Nothing else out of place. But the planner was gone. She was erasing my paper trail. I went to the hallway closet. Opened the old shoebox where I kept backups of everything, bank statements, passwords, keys. The USB drive was missing. My files. My logs. Gone. The rest was untouched. But I knew what she wanted. Not everything. Just enough to question my memory. To make me wonder if I'd misplaced them. But I hadn't. She was accelerating the plan. I called Dr. Lang again. No answer. Left a message, I've mailed the evidence. I don't think I'm safe much longer. That evening, Amber returned with groceries and a new humidifier. Dry air's not good for sleep, she said. She plugged it in by my bed. I unplugged it as soon as she left the room. I opened it. Inside the tank was clear water. But the scent was the same. Lavender. Chamomile. And something else. I poured it out in the sink. Bagged a sample. Refilled the tank with clean water. She never asked about it. The next morning, she left my bedroom door cracked open, even though I always closed it. She smiled and said, "You must have forgotten to shut it last night." I hadn't. I always did. Later that day, I found a letter on the kitchen counter. From a specialist. The letter claimed I'd missed an initial appointment and advised me to consider a cognitive evaluation soon. No sender. No address. Printed on blank paper with no header. Amber walked in as I read it. "Oh," she said casually, "Michael must have sent that over. He's been researching support services." I didn't reply. I just folded the letter and added it to my locked drawer. I was no longer fighting for my sanity. I was preserving evidence of hers. As I sat behind the wheel, the vial in hand, I realized, it wasn't mine. In a panic, I called my son. He answered. But wasn't my son. I sat in my locked car, gripping the vial through the plastic bag, hands trembling. The sun had barely risen, the streets still quiet, washed in that eerie pre-dawn silver. I needed to hear Michael's voice. To ground myself. To remind myself I wasn't completely alone in this. I dialed his number. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. "Hello?" My heart stuttered. It wasn't Michael. It sounded like him, but off. A slight delay. Too smooth. Like a recorded voice. Or something filtered. "Michael?" I asked. A pause. Then, "Hey, Mom." Still too smooth. "Are you okay?" I asked. Another pause. "I'm fine. Just tired." "What's going on?" I gripped the steering wheel. "Where are you?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, "Amber told me you've been calling late. You should rest. She's taking care of you." My blood ran cold. I ended the call. My heart pounded in my throat as I opened my call history. Michael's number hadn't changed. But when I looked at the details, I noticed something strange. The number redirected through a shared family plan. Amber's name was listed as the account owner. She had control of the phone line. She was rerouting my calls. Possibly forwarding texts. Maybe even using voice mimicry apps, technology one had only vaguely heard of. I opened my laptop, disconnected from the home Wi-Fi, and tried messaging Michael through social media. Blocked. Every platform. I checked email next. 2 messages sent from my account to Michael in the past week, Ones I didn't remember sending. One read, "I'm sorry for accusing Amber. I need rest. She's right." The second read, "Can we talk later? I'm confused." Both had his name. Both signed Mom. But I hadn't written them. She was inside everything. Every thread. Every connection. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just gaslighting. This was identity theft. She wasn't just trying to convince Michael I was unstable. She was replacing me. Bit by bit. Voice. Tone. Habits. Writing style. Until there was nothing left of me to trust. My hand shook as I pulled out the notebook again, now worn, full of scribbles and pasted photos and timestamps. I flipped to the last page and wrote in all caps. "She has my life." The doorbell rang. I froze. Through the peephole, Amber. Holding a tray. Another cup. Another tea. Another weapon disguised as kindness. I didn't answer. She knocked gently, then said, "I know you're scared. I'm trying to help." Her voice was soft. Sincere. But I knew what she was. Not a daughter-in-law. Not a caretaker. A predator. I waited until she walked away. Then I gathered every physical copy of my evidence, the notes, the printed screenshots, the photos, and drove them to a trusted neighbor, Carol. A woman who knew me long before Amber ever entered our lives. I didn't explain everything. I just handed her the envelope and said, "If I disappear, give this to Michael." Her eyes widened. "You're scaring me." "Good," I said. "Because I am scared." That night, I slept with my phone off and a camera running beside my bed, backed up to a private cloud. Amber set the phone down, smiling. Then I heard what she said to her reflection, "Almost yours." I pretended to sleep that night. But in the darkness, I wrote my goodbye. The house was too quiet again. Amber moved like a shadow now, careful, calculated. Her silence was louder than any scream. She had stopped offering food, tea, advice. She no longer needed to. She believed she'd won. And in a way, she had. I barely recognized myself anymore. The sharpness I'd built a career on now dulled under layers of anxiety and second-guessing. The woman in the mirror looked like me. But older. Fragile. Not because of age, but because of erosion. She'd been chipping at me piece by piece. And tonight, I felt hollow. But also clear. I sat down with my journal, the one I'd started hiding in my mattress. I turned to a fresh page and began to write. If you're reading this, then either I'm dead, or I've disappeared. Amber did this. She isolated me, manipulated my family, faked conversations, planted substances, and crafted a digital version of me that she controls. I wrote for hours. Details, dates, smells, locations, overheard whispers, tech manipulations, even the timestamps of Amber's staged fainting episode. I printed photos, even screenshots of the ghost emails I hadn't written. Every piece of evidence I'd collected went into a manila envelope. I wrote one name on the outside. Michael. Then I wrote a second letter. To myself. A reminder. Of who I was. Of what I knew. I wrote it in bold strokes. You are not crazy. She is not kind. You remember correctly. By 3 a.m. I'd finished both letters. I set them aside and lay down in the dark. I didn't sleep. I listened. At 3:23 a.m. I heard Amber's footsteps in the hallway. They stopped at my door. then slowly retreated. Morning came like a warning shot. The sun was too bright. I brewed coffee. Real coffee. For the first time in weeks. Amber appeared, startled. "That's a lot of caffeine," she said. I sipped slowly. "I'm not as fragile as you think." She tilted her head. "I never said you were." I smiled. "No. You just implied it." Every day. Later that morning, I made my move. I called my lawyer. Told him I wanted to update my will, transfer property control to a trust outside the family's reach. He asked why. I said, "Because someone is trying to erase me." He didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "Come in tomorrow. Bring everything." Amber must have sensed something. That night, she hovered in the hallway again. I waited until she was asleep, then placed the envelope addressed to Michael in Carol's mailbox with a handwritten note. "Give this to him if anything happens before tomorrow." Then I went back inside and waited. She stood there, keys trembling in her hand, tears in her eyes. I had her evidence on the table. Amber stepped into the room slowly. Her hand still held my spare keys. She didn't speak. She just looked at me, like she was waiting to see which version of me would show up. The weak one? The scared one? Instead, I stood tall. "I know everything," I said. Her eyes didn't flinch. "You've been under a lot of pressure." "No," I said. "You've been applying it." I pulled the manila folder from the table and slid it across the surface toward her. Inside, the printouts, the time-stamped photos, the screenshots from her fake emails, copies of the blood work, and Dr. Lang's toxicology report, all now signed and notarized. Amber's mask faltered. Only for a second. She sat down slowly, as if calculating. "You think this will stop me?" "No," I replied. "This will." I clicked the small remote on the table. A screen lit up. A video played, one I'd recorded 2 nights ago. Amber, in the kitchen, whispering into her phone. "I've got her sleep cycle down. She's off balance. 1 more week, she won't even know what day it is." Amber stood suddenly. "What do you want?" she hissed. "Nothing," I said. "I already won." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Michael walked in. His eyes met mine, then Amber's. He had the envelope Carol gave him. He'd read it. Every word. He looked pale. Betrayed. Broken. "Is it true?" he asked Amber quietly. She said nothing. Michael didn't need confirmation. He stepped back, almost dazed. I turned to Amber. "You tried to make me disappear," I said. "Now it's your turn." Weeks later. The house is quiet again, but now, in peace, not fear. Amber is gone. Officially, she left to seek help. Unofficially, Michael helped ensure she wouldn't be coming back. He never said sorry. But he stayed. Cooked me breakfast once. Sat in silence. That was enough. I didn't need redemption. I just needed my life back. I poured myself a cup of my coffee. Strong. Bitter. Free of everything but caffeine. Outside, birds chirped. Peace returned not with a celebration, but with silence. I wasn't who I used to be. But I was still here. Still whole. And still me. No melodrama or violence. Just quiet reclamation of identity, peace, and control. The villain removed not with screaming, but with truth.